Picture this. A room full of important out-of-town executives, standing in a hallway, watching their contact person get told to his face that he's not welcome in his own meeting. That's exactly what happened to a man we'll call Karl. He spent months stealing chairs, stealing credit, and stealing an entire room that wasn't his. He had one phrase he loved to throw around whenever he took something that didn't belong to him: first come, first served. He had no idea that phrase was about to end his career at that office. This is the story of how a dozen quiet cubicle workers waited, planned, and served Karl exactly what he'd been asking for. If you've ever worked with someone who thought the rules only applied to everyone else, the coworker who takes your chair, your credit, your peace of mind, you are going to love this one. This is a slow burn, and the payoff is worth every second. Hit like, subscribe, and settle in, because karma is about to clock in for the day shift. The office floor was nothing special. A dozen cubicles arranged in tidy rows, gray fabric walls, the low hum of keyboards, and half-finished coffee. It was the kind of place where nobody expected drama. People said good morning. People brought in donuts on Fridays. It worked, in the quiet, unremarkable way most offices work, because everyone silently agreed to respect a few unspoken rules. Don't touch someone else's stuff. Don't take credit for someone else's work. Don't make yourself the center of a story that belongs to everyone. Then Karl got hired. From his first week, something about him felt off. He didn't ease into the culture of the floor. He barreled through it. He had a voice that carried, a walk that took up more space than it needed to, and an unshakable belief that he was the smartest, busiest, most important person in any room he entered. Assignments landed on his desk and mysteriously reappeared on someone else's, always with the same tired excuse: I don't have time for this. He said it with a sigh, like the rest of them should feel honored to pick up his slack. Then came the chair. It probably sounds small. A chair. But if you've ever worked in an office, you know a good chair is sacred ground. Karl's chair was old, a little squeaky, the padding worn thin in the seat. Instead of putting in a request with facilities like a normal person, he simply swapped it. Quietly, efficiently, with a chair from another employee's cubicle. When she came back from a meeting and found her comfortable, ergonomic chair gone, replaced with Karl's tired old one, he had his explanation ready before she even asked. His back. His bad, bad back. Never mind that nobody had ever heard him mention it before that exact moment. It didn't stop there. Staples disappeared from desks. Pens vanished. A stress ball someone kept as a little desk mascot went missing and turned up weeks later on Karl's monitor stand, like he'd forgotten it was ever anyone else's. Every time, if he was caught, out came the same 4 words, delivered with a shrug and zero shame: first come, first served. It became a kind of dark joke on the floor. Somebody's favorite mug missing? First come, first served. Somebody's parking spot taken? First come, first served. The phrase stopped being funny fast. It started to feel like a threat disguised as a joke. A way of saying, if you're not fast enough to defend what's yours, it's mine now. Then Karl found the small room. It sat at the edge of the floor, tucked against an outside wall, close enough to the cubicles that everyone could see straight into it through the glass. Just a modest table, 4 chairs, sometimes 6 if people didn't mind squeezing in elbow to elbow. It was where small groups went to hash out a project away from the noise of the floor. Nothing fancy, nothing anyone thought twice about, until Karl started treating it like it was his. At first, it was just papers. He'd work in there during the day and leave a stack behind when he left for the night. Nobody said anything. A few days later, it was his coffee mug, sitting there in the morning like it had never left. Then his laptop. Then, one Monday morning, people walked past the small room and stopped in their tracks. His cubicle was empty. Not took the day off, empty, gutted. His monitor, his keyboard, his little collection of desk clutter, even his actual desk, gone. All of it had reappeared inside the small room. He had, without asking a single person, without so much as a heads up to a manager, moved his entire workstation into a shared space and claimed it as his own private office. People tried to talk to him, reasonably, at first. Karl, this room is for everyone. Karl, we use this space for group work. He barely looked up from his monitor. First come, first served, he said, like it was scripture. Like 4 words could just override every unwritten rule the floor had operated by for years. Then the sign appeared, a little nameplate, stuck right outside the door of what used to be shared space. His name, in print. Like he'd made it official. Like the small room had a deed now, and his name was on the title. That was the moment something shifted in the group. It wasn't really about the room anymore, or the chair, or the staples. It was about the sheer, breathtaking audacity of a man who had been on the floor for a few months, deciding unilaterally that the space belonging to everyone now belonged to him, and daring anyone to say otherwise. The real trigger, though, wasn't the office. It was the powwow. Once a year, the location hosted a major meeting, the kind that pulled in people from out of town, put them up in a hotel down the road, and mattered enough that leadership actually paid attention to how it went. It was the sort of event that reflected on the whole floor, not just one person. Karl appointed himself the coordinator. Nobody voted him into that role. Nobody asked him to take it. He simply decided it was his, the same way he decided the small room was his. He started fielding calls from the visiting personnel directly, cutting out anyone else who might normally have been looped in. He hovered over the admin assistant's desk so often, peppering her with demands and last-minute changes that people could see the tension building in her shoulders every time he approached. And here's the part that really lit the fuse. He told no one. Not the team. Not, as it turned out, even their own boss, who worked out of a different location and had no idea this meeting. The one bearing her department's name was happening at all, let alone that Karl had crowned himself its sole point of contact. He wanted to be the only face those important visitors ever saw, the only name they'd remember. He wanted the credit, the visibility, the win, without doing a single bit of the actual legwork the rest of the floor usually shared. That's when someone on the floor learned the date of the big meeting, and a very simple, very elegant idea started to take shape. There's a particular kind of satisfaction that comes from beating someone at their own game, using their own words. The plan was almost insultingly simple. Down the hall from the cubicles sat the real conference room, the good one. Long table that could seat a dozen comfortably, a big screen mounted on the wall for video calls, a side table for coffee and pastries during longer sessions. Nobody used it much day to day, because there was rarely a need. There was a sign-up sheet sitting with the admin assistant outside the door, though most people never bothered with it. Why would they? The room almost always sat empty. So the plan maker walked up to that same admin assistant, the one Karl had been running ragged for weeks, and asked to reserve the conference room for the date of the big meeting. She paused. "Karl's meeting is that day?" she said carefully, although he hasn't actually reserved it yet. And there it was, the opening. "First come, first served," came the reply. Karl's own phrase, handed right back to her, and by extension, right back to him. The look on her face said everything. A slow smile, a little spark of mischief. She wrote the name down on the sign-up sheet without another word of hesitation. The night before the meeting, once Karl had cleared out for the day, 5 coworkers moved. Quietly, efficiently, almost gleefully, they wheeled their office chairs down the hall, carrying stacks of files, cardboard boxes, laptops, power cords. By the time they were done, the conference table looked like it belonged to a company mid-audit. Folders stacked in towers, boxes lining the wall, laptops plugged in and glowing at every seat. Karl, of course, suspected nothing. He'd arranged to meet the visiting executives for breakfast at their hotel, a mile away, before walking them over for the 9 o'clock start. He had no reason to think anything was wrong. As far as he knew, the room, like everything else on that floor, was simply his for the taking. At 8 o'clock the next morning, the group filed into the conference room and shut the door behind them. A PowerPoint went up on the big screen. Laptops hummed to life. Someone stood at the head of the table and began walking through slides like it was the most normal meeting in the world. Because, as far as the sign-up sheet was concerned, it absolutely was. Around 8:45, voices drifted down the hallway. Footsteps. The low murmur of visitors making small talk as they approached. The door swung open. Karl stood frozen in the doorway, his mouth opened, then closed. Behind him, clustered in the hallway, the out-of-town visitors peered curiously past his shoulder into a room that was very clearly occupied, very clearly organized, and very clearly not going anywhere. "You need to get out," Karl said, his voice climbing. "I have important visitors. I need this room." The presenter didn't even pause the slide. "We reserved this room weeks ago. We're in the middle of a meeting." A beat. "And by the way, that small room isn't available to us anymore either. Someone put a nameplate on it. You could see it hit him, the exact moment the trap closed." Karl spun on his heel and marched to the admin assistant's desk, his voice rising loud enough to carry down the hall as he demanded she fix this, immediately, right now. She held her ground. A full minute of him leaning over her desk, arguing, gesturing, and she didn't budge, because there was nothing to budge on. The sheet said what it said. He stormed back into the doorway one more time, launching a final demand to vacate. "First come, first served," came the answer. Calm, almost cheerful. And Karl knew, in that moment, exactly what defeat tasted like. He ended up hustling his very confused, very unimpressed visitors up to a spare conference room on the floor above, a consolation prize that fooled no one, and the fallout didn't stop at embarrassment. Those visitors, unhappy with the chaos of the morning, sent sharp, pointed emails straight up the chain. Emails that landed on the desk of a boss who, as it turned out, had never even been told this meeting was happening. She hadn't been invited. She hadn't been consulted. Her name was on the department, and she found out about the disaster after the fact, from complaint emails. When she came in to get to the bottom of it, she didn't just learn about the meeting. She learned about the room. She stood in the doorway of what had, until recently, been shared space for the whole floor, and saw Karl's nameplate on the door, his desk crammed inside, his coffee mug sitting on the table like he'd built himself a kingdom out of borrowed furniture and stolen square footage. Karl moved back to his old cubicle within the week. No fanfare. No excuses this time. Just a quiet, humiliating retreat to the same 4 gray walls he'd abandoned months earlier, thinking he'd never have to come back. There's something deeply satisfying about watching someone get beaten by their own logic. Karl didn't get outsmarted by some elaborate scheme or a shouting match. He got beaten by 4 words he'd used to justify every bit of selfishness for months, turned around and handed right back to him at the worst possible moment. Sometimes the sweetest justice isn't loud. It's just patient. It waits for the right sign-up sheet, and it signs its name first. If this story gave you a little jolt of satisfaction, smash that like button and let us know in the comments.